Еще раз всем доброе утро.
Good morning again. We are happy to greet you at this session. It's Global Diplomats Forum. So, dear Sergei Viktorovich and Anatoly Vasilyevich, and dear colleagues, dear guests, we are happy to welcome you at the first Global Forum of Young Diplomats in Sochi, the capital of Winter Olympics of 2014 and the city where 2018 Football Championship will take place. The Forum of Young Diplomats is a unique platform of informal communication of young diplomats. With the current developments in the world, I'm sure there's something there are a lot of things we can discuss. The Council of Young Diplomats of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is being here working with you at the forum. We started the work 4 years ago, and currently we have conducted 12 meetings for Eurasia, Europe, BRICS, and Islamic Cooperation Organization. The Global Forum of Young Diplomats for the first time got together with the delegates from the whole world, and we are convinced that only together, based on the polycentricity, equality, openness, and mutually beneficial cooperation basis, we will be able to improve the world. I would like to say thank you to the delegates of the country who had supported our initiative at the previous meeting to set up an organization of young diplomats, and we can see that this facility is very well needed to support the peaceful coexistence for many years ahead. And would like to welcome and greet you again and wish you successful work. Thank you. And would like to give the floor to Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov. Good morning. Good morning, dear colleagues, friends. And I'm happy to be here at the first Global Forum of Young Diplomats, which is arranged in the framework of the 19th World Festival of Youth and Students. And I'm very happy to notice that that was the initiative of our young diplomats of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and was widely supported. And as far as I understand, there are more than 50 foreign affairs officers here. And I think that this kind of meetings will be useful if traditional, and I know that you do have such plans to set up International Association of Young Diplomats, and we are going to actively support this kind of initiatives wherever we can. Supporting, not trying to impose anything on you. We are not imposing anything on anyone because that's our foreign affairs principle. We are here to understand our partners and how to find the balance between the interests of Russia and its partners. And I'm sure that becoming a diplomat, that was your right choice in life of your career, because diplomacy is one of the most attractive, very well in demand, and very promising professions, because international relations becoming more and more complicated, and there are so many components, and under the circumstances, the role of diplomacy searching for effective responses for large-scale challenges of the modern time, unlike the past times when usually diplomats were dealing with war and peace issues. Here we are involved in all spheres of human life, from sustainable economic development of the global economy in all segments down to the climate change and food safety. Regulation of air traffic and sea routes and a lot of other things we are involved in. So the present diplomat should be very well developed and very well versed, and that's why this kind of communication and networking and socializing and discussing very burning issues of the international agenda is a very important thing, and I'm sure the role of diplomacy will ever grow. No modern information technologies would replace diplomacy. They can just use as a supporting tool in our everyday hard work, because without direct communication, face-to-face, eye-to-eye, without exchange of dialogue, it will be impossible to clarify the positions of partners and understand how to see eye-to-eye and find compromise and the balance of interest I was talking about in very different spheres of international life. Needless to say that the challenges of today can be solved only based on the collective political and diplomatic efforts. So that's a universal effort which is applicable to almost any problem international agenda. When the unilateral or lopsided approaches or illegitimate pressure, when diplomacy's pressure trying to be put down into a corner, nothing very fruitful will be done, and the results can be very bad. And I think in this audience, maybe we should not discuss at large that the main prerequisites of providing security, safety, and stability is the following of international law by all participants of international life. And that's why Russia is calling on everybody to get down to the onset and the Charter of the UNO, of the principles of international life, its sovereign rights and non-interference into internal affairs and solving all disputes by peaceful means. And as I said, Russia is not teaching anyone how to live, and our diplomacy is trying to do its best to help and improve the international situation and solve all the issues that the world is facing. And I'm very happy to say that our approach of mutual effort to create equal security and streamlining mutually beneficial cooperation is shared by the majority of the international community, and we are ready to work hand in hand with all those who are ready to do it based on mutual respect and taking into account of the interests of each other. Today, there's a new and more fair, democratic, polycentric system is being developed, and cultural civilization, diversity of the globe, of the world, and the desire of the peoples to identify their own destiny is the basis. And when such processes are developing so stormily, and the new parameters are being developed, which would reflect the reality of our today's life in all its spheres, I think that it's a high time to really recover the diplomacy, and we rely very much that your today's forum will be successful and will become will begin the new tradition of communication at the level of young diplomats. And if this is going to happen regularly and continue regularly, and when you occupy leading foreign affairs positions, I think those ties and friendly relations will be quite useful to you then. And I think that that's a really very useful thing, very useful initiative. So I wish you very fruitful work, and we'll try to help you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sergei Viktorovich. I would like to give the floor to Rector of Moscow International Relations University, Mr. Torkunov. Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very happy to welcome all the participants of this current meeting. That's the first meeting of this type, but I'm sure that even the fact of the involvement of the leader of the most active diplomatic service of the world, and quite a prominent diplomat all over the world by his principal position and activity, should determine the success of your meeting. And very important is to make those meetings regular. We all realize, well, that diplomacy is one of the most ancient profession. When the first groups of people appeared, there were problems and disputes and conflicts among them. At the first, initially, they were doing it by force, but gradually they realized that it's more beneficial not to use weapons, but to maybe discuss it. And then thus the ancestors of diplomats appeared, and the practice of relations between the countries developed the norms and rules of solving disputes peacefully. But unfortunately, it is not always always that diplomacy managed to prevent wars, including global wars. Though, by the way, a French diplomat, one of the theoreticians of diplomacy, very well known, French Capon, he characterized diplomacy as an art of negotiating and concluding agreements aimed at looking for ways to not to exercise force in mutual relations. And our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Gromyko, used to say that it is better to negotiate for 10 years than to lead a war for one day. And diplomacy today, as Sergei Viktorovich said, can solve problems not only related to war and peace problems, but also there are new industry, new areas of diplomacy, ecological diplomacy, for instance, and sports and athletes diplomacy, and also diplomacy of cyberspace and many others, many other industries or areas of diplomacy. Russian diplomatic service is actively engaged in implementing the positions and concepts of the foreign policy of Russia, which was approved by the president of our country. And the main thing is to pursue multi-vector independent foreign policy, which postulates the protection of sovereignty and creation of conditions for development of Russia and its citizens. And I think that for those who decided to become diplomats in their careers will have to work quite hard, but there are all capabilities and all opportunities for you to express and reflect your positions and your in protecting both national interests of your countries and also totally to protect peace and international cooperation. So I'm sure that those who chose this way of career will not regret. The prominent diplomats of the past and the present have published many recommendations to young diplomats based on their own experience as to what kind of qualities a successful diplomat should have. I will briefly try to recap with those recommendations and maybe add some of my own experience. First of all, a diplomat should be a patriot of his motherland, not just an hurrah patriot, but those who really have deep knowledge of the culture and history of the countries, convinced that its current vector of development and the position in international affairs really reflects the national interest. It's not just a formula written in stone. There's always an opportunity for you to improve as to how to effectively achieve the goals set. A diplomat is called for to learn and study and improve its professional status. Diplomats and soldiers are not born resting on your laurels, should be only at your retirement time. So superfluous knowledge will lead to superfluous activities. Demosthenes said that we don't have any fortresses, any vessels or ships. We are to look for favorable conditions, and diplomats have to wage polemics with foreign colleagues, to say nothing of the mass media colleagues, and speak up at international forums. And the arguments should be well versed. And if you wage a discussion, you should be very cool, calm, and collected, not to demonstrate irritation. And that's very often what the partners want you to do. And you should pay special attention to your writing skills, because you have to know how to put down all those protocols and drafts of agreements, your speeches, your presentations. That's one of the main chores of the diplomats, not only young diplomats, but so-called writers, those who can do it well. The guys are very well, the ministry values them very much. And you have to develop your research skills, your analytics, because you have to issue forecasts and assumptions of the developments of different situations in different countries and in the relations of multilateral and unilateral. Churchill used to say that you have to forecast to your government what will happen in this country of presence, and then to get them persuaded why it has not happened. I would allow myself not to agree, because we are in the mindset that we should either justify our forecast or not do it. And when Mr. Vinogradov, an ambassador in Turkey during the Stalingrad battle, he was asked whether Ankara is going to get involved or get neutral, the ambassador said, no, we won't. This forecast was done based on the very deep forecast of the Turkish policy, and as a result, the majority of the troops were dislocated from the borders from Turkey to Stalingrad, and that helped us to win. Very important, of course, is a very high level of foreign languages command, especially in the countries of presence, which allow you to have more frank and sincere conversations with your partners and vis-a-vis. Besides, the diplomats will have to translate at very different levels from the members of delegations up to the leadership of the country. And very often, not only career of the diplomat depends very much, but also the assessment of his foreign language abilities. No diplomatic service of the world can compete today with our diplomats. Quite recent summit of President Putin with leaders of other countries was provided. Russian diplomats were provided with translation. Of course, we will have to very often solve some very complicated issues in a very unfriendly situations with tough climatic conditions or countries which are pursuing wars. And if you remember, in 2016, due to terrorist act, our ambassador in Ankara, Andrei Karlov, perished. But despite all those difficulties, the Russian diplomats honestly and responsibly perform their chores and are fighting and protecting the interests of Russia. And I would like to wish you success in serving your own countries, and needless to say, success in your diplomatic careers. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anatoly Vasilyevich. If you allow me, just a brief introduction. We have a format of interaction of young diplomats, and among our speakers, we have leaders of similar representatives similar to Russian diplomatic service from Abkhazia and Belarus, and I would request them to say a couple of introductory greeting words. Dear Sergei Viktorovich and dear Anatoly Vasilyevich, Konstantin Olegovich, dear colleagues, allow me to thank you for this opportunity to be here with the leading diplomats, not only of Russian Federation, but the whole world. First of all, I would like to say thank you to Konstantin Olegovich and the Council of Young Diplomats of the Foreign Affairs of Russia for this honor to be here among you today. And I would like to say that the interaction of the young diplomats of Russia and the Council of Young Diplomats of Abkhazia is intensively developing. Just the first agreement that was signed between the two councils was first not only for the Russian Council of Young Diplomats, but also for the Abkhazian ones. And we really value it and appreciate and would like to develop it further and interact in this format, and would like to say thank you to our Russian colleagues for this opportunity to meet and communicate and exchange opinions. And I would like to wish all the participants interesting forum for you to have good reminiscences, good impressions, and good friends that you will be able to be friends and communicate in the future. Thank you. Thank you very much, Inara. Now, Ekaterina Mozgevaya. Good morning, dear colleagues. My name is Ekaterina Mozgevaya. I represent Belarus at the forum. And for the beginning, I would like to say that for me it's quite an honor to be here at this event, and I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Council of Young Diplomats for this great initiative, and which is also very important of its successful implementation. Having this unique platform in the framework of which the young diplomats can freely exchange ideas and discuss burning issues informally, which is also very important to set up personal, friendly contacts. All this will facilitate greater confidence and mutual understanding among states. Under the modern circumstances, it is important to promote this kind of uniting initiatives, and that's why it makes me happy to be part of this new history of the new format of international cooperation. And I would like to wish the participants of the forum every success, and besides unforgettable impressions of being in Sochi, to acquire very important experience in their everyday diplomatic work. Thank you. Ekaterina, thank you very much. And I would like to open for our delegates from the countries who attended the first Young Diplomats session. This is the Q&A session, and you're welcome with your questions. I mean, yes, from foreign countries. Yes, it's a Q&A session, so you're welcome with your questions. Arseny, it's a Czech Republic. Do you think, Mr. Lavrov, that it's possible to unite the Slavic countries? Because it would be great for us not to dispute and quarrel, but do some useful things together. Yes, it's possible, and it's already underway, because several years ago, I think it's about a decade ago, at the initiative of Slovenia and Russia, a forum of Slavic peoples were set up, which is functioning quite successfully, and cultural events are conducted regularly, and we discuss different prospects of specific projects of mutually beneficial and economy and social sphere, education, in the sphere if you want, of Christianity. And I think that this format has very good prospects, and they are quite in demand. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You're welcome here next to, from Africa, our colleague from Africa. You're welcome. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak up. And first of all, I would like to say thank you to Sergei Viktorovich for the very high level of diplomacy, because it's not only very useful for Russian Federation, but it's very good for the whole world and Africa. And we would like all us present to say thank you to him and applaud. My question is as follows. I think that your teachers, you mentioned that your alma mater is the International Relations University. I'm sure that your teachers, based on the highest level of your diplomacy, I think they would give you the highest score. But the area, well, I mean, I'm from Chad, which is Central Africa, and I work in the International Association of Russia, and I think that's the Central Africa.
In all likelihood, to be honest, I think you would concur that it's C-. Why? Because I think those countries, well, you know, I've been following your voyages around the world, and it's not often the case that you visit often Western Africa. Well, it doesn't look like you are too interested in that region. We may not have developed infrastructure or world-renowned industries, but we do have mineral resources, and we have people who are very appreciative of Russia's international policy. We have a lot of youngsters, and if you'd conduct a poll in Africa, I am sure that more than 60% of youth would be appreciative of President Putin's policy. So here's my question. in the future? Do you expect to have any trips to Africa and the Republic of Chad in the near future? As far as I remember, President Putin invited the president of Chad to visit Russia, apparently, they had started preparations, but then the meeting of the two presidents was cancelled. If possible, I would like to know the reason behind the cancellation. And do you have any plans to pursue development with Western Africa and the Republic of Chad? My second question, if that's okay, after the assassination of President Gaddafi, Dmitry Medvedev talked to TV reporters from his residence, and he said that Russia had made a deliberate decision to refrain from active action after the passing of the UN decision to establish an air traffic-free zone. Russia had the right to exercise the veto right, but according to Mr. Medvedev, Russia decided to refrain from it. Was it a deal, a trade in exchange for entering the WTO, or was there any other reason? Because after Russia had refrained from exercising their veto right, President Barack Obama okayed its joining the WTO. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes. Well, about trading, no trading had taken place whatsoever, nor could there have been any. The United States wanted Russia to enter the WTO. It was in their best interest, and that is why they finally abolished the Jackson-Vanik law. Well, the reason had long since ceased to exist. Ban on immigration from the Soviet Union had been the reason. Well, members of the Congress and Senate, allows them to make any pretexts to impede to hinder abolishment of obsolete laws and enactments. So, in a nutshell, there had been no trading, and there was a desire to prevent blood spilling. That is why we decided not to hinder the passing of this resolution in instituting air traffic-free zones above Libya. That only meant one thing. Aviation of Libya was not supposed to fly, and nor did they. So the Security Council passed a ruling that the air traffic-free zone regime must be assured. That meant, and it still does, that military force can only be exercised once this air traffic-free zone is violated. But instead of that, our colleagues from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization sent their aircraft flying and started bombing Gaddafi's army. They started helping the riots do away with the Syrian army, and we'll remember that American TV channels just relished this massacre, this murderous assassination of President Gaddafi. As President Putin pointed out, that was a blatant violation of the UN Security Council resolution. That, witnesses to the features of interaction with our Western peers. They acted in a treacherous and dishonest way, I would say, but it does happen every now and then when you deal with our Western colleagues. As to Africa, by Central Africa, I mean, you not just mean the Central African Republic, it's the entire region. I see. Yes, I know what you mean. We are in a regular dialogue with our peers from that region. I've been talking, I've been receiving regular visits from my peers, and the visit of His Excellency the President of Chad will take place once both parties have arranged everything. There is no subtext whatsoever. We just need to clarify the agenda. You mentioned mineral resources. Well, I'll bet there are projects your country is interested in. I'll bet there are partners ready to pursue them, but we just need to arrange things between us. What will be the outcome of such an important summit? I mean, the official visit of the president of Chad. Yes, but in addition to mineral resources, we also have many decades of history behind us, starting with struggle of African states against colonialism, and our country has contributed to that struggle, to that battle. Our country contributed to African countries in establishing themselves as sovereign and independent states. We have been receiving numerous expressions of gratitude, and based on the closeness of our views of the modern world and ways to pursue international relationships. I guess that is a great heritage, but there is an issue we have to resolve. We have this splendid level of political relationship. Now, the question is how best to translate that into economic and other spheres. You are quite right, we have to cooperate more, and there are projects that will help us cooperate in a closer manner. They must be mutually beneficial. They must help us pursue our interests in the Republic of Chad, in Africa, in other regions of the world. Quite recently, the city of Sochi hosted the president of the Central African Republic. I had a very fruitful conversation with His Excellency, and this year, quite a few senior officials from Africa visited the Russian Federation. As to my personal calendar, I'm going to have a visit of Africa this coming year. When couldn't tell you right away, there are things to clarify and arrange. But your point is duly noted, and if your government confirms their invitation, then I would be more than happy. Sorry, no mic, no translation. What about Mr. Medvedev's word? Deliberately, we deliberately refrained. Did you think that it was conscienceless? I understand the meaning here is double-folded. Well, now, you listen to me. When Russia votes, it is always deliberate. It is always, thought through. The accomplishment was as follows. The resolution of the Security Council was constrained within the framework that I mentioned, aircraft-free zone and permission to exercise military force only to assure observance of that resolution. We did have our reservations as to the need for that resolution, but we resolved not to veto it because it did not mandate any use of military force against the Gaddafi army, provided that there is not one single aircraft in the aircraft-free zone, which is what had only happened. NATO resorted to illegitimate action. Yes, I'm so sorry for holding this up. No, I'm so sorry. There are others, and the clock is ticking. So let us give the floor to other delegates. You, sir, in checkered jacket. Hashim Hamad is my name. Good morning. It is well known that Russia has a good relationship with Iraq and Kurdistan. And these days we witness military conflicts between the Kurdistan army and Hashdashakbi Khaturi troops, which are supported by the Iraqi government. What is Russia's stance toward this conflict. And my other question is as follows: is Russia ready to help the government of Iraq and leaders of Kurdistan to help them out with negotiations? Well, about the conflict, our stance is highly negative. We don't believe that is in the best interest of the entire Iraqi people, including the Kurds, and we want them to achieve consent in respect of how best to live within a single United State. Yes, indeed, right, you are. Our relationship with both governments is good, and we have consulates there, and whatever contacts we have, we are supposed to have economic contacts with Kurdistan. They are no secret to the government, central government in Baghdad. We always discuss such issues with the government of His Excellency President Ahmadi, and that is what we will keep doing. So we will keep urging both parties to get on the same page to achieve accord with due account of all the aspects, including regional ones, because the Kurdistan issue is relevant not just to Iraq, it's relevant to Iran, Syria, Turkey, and this interest, that region has a lot of unrest there, so it is in everybody's interest that peace is established. Unfortunately, in due course, enough efforts had not taken place in order to resolve the two issues. Well, first of all, how best to manage oil revenue, and secondly, the status of Kirkuk. Well, save it for later approach did not prove too fruitful in order to assure calm, stable development of that state. Yes, you young man with the book. Shakir Huda of the Mordovia State University. How best to protect world peace is a very relevant issue. My question is addressed to His Excellency, Mr. Lavrov. Protecting peace is very important, of course, but how best to defend it when we are having hard time defending dignity of peacekeepers? I'm talking about torch marches of fascists and Nazis, and I would like to talk about this decommunization law that was passed in Poland. That law is going to take effect in a week from now. Under that law, they will have legal grounds to destroy monuments to the heroes of World War II, from the Allied States. A couple of days ago, there was a conference in Poland. It was organized by the citizens of Poland, by the way. At that conference, Ms. Zaharova spoke, and I would like to praise her for that. But the question is how best to put these issues into worldwide spotlight, because how best not to allow world community to overlook such issues. Are there any tools or instruments to hinder that? Yes, the leverage is there, and we've been using them for many years. Unfortunately, the result hasn't been very impressive. For many years we have been hosting, we've been passing a resolution of the General Assembly of the United Nations about unacceptability of heroization of Nazism, about unacceptability of violation of World War II monuments. It is always passed almost unanimously. The United States vote against it. Ukraine has been voting against it for 3 years, and a couple other micro states depending on the United States vote against it. Some countries refrain from voting, withhold their vote, but when you ask them a question about the reason behind this position of our neighbors, they answer, we do not want you to hurt the 3 Baltic countries because they have their complexes. Firstly, that resolution does not mention one single state. Well, it only states that it is unacceptable to make criminals condemned by the Nuremberg heroes. As to complexes felt by some countries, apparently, that's nothing new. You know, the three Baltic states, they had not been ready to enter NATO and EU, but they were pulling them there literally. So asked our peers from NATO, why do you pull them so hard? Because, they have been talking against Russia. Well, and the question was, the answer was, they remember their Soviet past. They have been occupied. They're very nervous, so we will embrace them, the EU and NATO, and they will calm down. Did they calm down? No, they didn't. And moreover, these days, whenever they talk about relationship with Russia, the European Union follows the lead of this aggressive minority, where the three Baltic countries play leading parts. As you rightfully pointed out, unfortunately, heroization of neo-Nazis is a problem not just is the feature of not just the three Baltic countries and Poland. Well, neo-Nazism is flourishing in the Ukraine in recent years. Well, only yesterday they had this new Defender of the Fatherland Day. It was to commemorate the establishment of this Ukrainian national armies, which was Nazi in essence. You know, it is beyond me. Ukraine is the country that suffered greatly during the Second World War, and they are absorbing this filth. There is no other way to call it with ease these days, and that is a huge issue. It's not just the General Assembly resolution that we resort to. We work with the European Union, European Security and Cooperation Organization on a daily basis. In respect of monuments, we have prepared very specific and detailed proposals to UNESCO and to the General Assembly. This is the topic that was one of the main topics of my speech at the General Assembly last month. Unfortunately, the effort has not been too fruitful, and as you rightfully pointed out, our Western peers overlook, they turn a blind eye to their duty to make their colleagues in the European Union respect and observe European values. As you can see, there is always this desire to get together against Russia, unfortunately. Well, that will cast a negative impact on the doers, I am very sure of that, but this decommunization process, it has a long history behind it. In Poland, after the collapse of the Warsaw Treaty Organization, and in the Czech Republic, if memory serves, well, we are all diplomats here, so it's many, graduates of Soviet universities and the MGIMO University primarily, they were all fired from the Polish Foreign Ministry and the Czech Foreign Ministry, but experience indicates that MGIMO graduates are in high call for both in their independent countries and in the interests of active involvement in worldwide cooperation. The Vice President and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Slovakia, Miroslav Walczyk, is a graduate of the MGIMO University. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have too much time remaining. Are you a diplomat?
Are you a diplomat?
Откуда здесь не дипломаты, интересно?
How come there are non-diplomats here in this hall? Well, firstly, I would like to offer to greet His Excellency the Minister And I would like to offer my gratitude for Russia's stance in. I am Somara Saima. I am from a refugees camp in Sakharov. I represent the youth there, and I am a diplomat from from the Republic of Syria. My question is as follows. I would like to know your position, Russia's position. Russia is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. What about blue caps and their cooperation within the framework of MINUSR? Because, like you know, they came over 2 years ago to have a meeting, and then it's been 2 years, and we still hope that Russia, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, will take a decision within the framework of its foreign policy, and that its position will bring its results in terms of non-violation of human rights. So here in Moscow, when we talked to students of the International Friendship University, we saw that Russia is developing, and many people have studied in Russia. And so my question is, why did the youth of Sakharovia not get an opportunity to study here in Russia? Thank you. Thank you for your question. I do confirm our position. We are all in favor of a resolution of the Western Sahara issue based on the UN resolution, and such resolutions are passed on a regular basis, and well, they confirm the mandate of the forces in Western Sahara. We will do whatever we can in order to maintain consensus on this issue. On the eve of such resolutions, there are always consultations with the parties concerned, including diplomats from Western Sahara and representing it in the United Nations organization. I say that is the only way to promote and drive resolution of that issue that would be mutually acceptable to all the parties concerned. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. And thank you. Well, I represent the Democratic Republic of Congo here. I have two questions. My first question concerns policy of your country in its relationship with the United States of America. And my other question concerns Africa. Well, I would like to say that these days there is hardly anyone who would dispute the fact that you are one of the pillars, you personally are one of the pillars of worldwide diplomacy. But there is one thing that I am still struggling to comprehend. Why you have been so self-resistant in your relationship with the USA?
And some interaction. Well, if they do something bad, you should respond, because we just don't understand when you are ready for just anything. And the second question is about your policy in relation to Africa, and to be more precise, in relation to the Democratic Republic of Congo, because I can say that the Democratic Republic of Congo, well, at least it seems to me this way. Why, I would like to say, because it's a strategically important country with huge natural resources, as well as Russia. But since this is a country which is very reserved in its behavior, do you think it's to meet you halfway? I think we should say that the Western side is behind the scene, and they are just waiting for you to do things. And that's exactly my question. Thank you very much beforehand for your answer. Well, about our relations with Democratic Republic of Congo. Well, we are accused of many things, and you are accusing now that the conflict is not settled because of us, because we are very passive. But that's not true. We are the direct participant of the negotiations of the future of the Democratic Republic of Congo. We are a part of the group of the region of Great Lakes, which is actively involved in this, helping the Congolese, first of all, to eliminate terrorist threat, and secondly, to find a way to provide sustainable development of its country. Unfortunately, the agreements that were reached at the beginning of the year and everybody was so actively welcomed are now under threat, not undermining, but sort of dragging or postponing. I mean, this election agreement, and from time to time we hear said that technically it is difficult to do before the end of the year, and that provides a pretext to the opposition to accuse the government that they are unwilling to perform, and we are always motivating a dialogue between the main opponents. Only the Congolese are to solve their own destiny. It's not Russia or France or Belgium or the United States. They will not be able to do it instead of you. So my advice to you, please provide inside your country the fulfillment of what was agreed some time ago. As I mentioned, very important aspect of diplomacy and human value is being able to negotiate and agree. That's why, that's how I think you will not have to find the states beyond Congo, which will, at the magic wand, will solve and settle all your internal problems. I wish you success. Quite recently, I met the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Democratic Republic of Congo and Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the neighboring countries. From Burundi, a colleague from Burundi visited Moscow several days ago, and many others, those who are actively participating in the negotiation process with those who support the dialogue, without which your problems will not be solved. As for our relations with the United States, as far as I understand, you are in favor of us being as aggressive as they are in their diplomatic scale. And what good do you think will this make us? Very often I hear people say here in the Russian Federation also that you should not act according to the principle, and if they hit you on your left cheek, you should provide your right cheek to be hit. So, but we are based on our own interests. Yes, indeed. When the Obama administration, the laureate of Nobel Peace Prize, at the end of his term, spoiled the relations, and last December illegitimately expropriated the diplomatic property of the Russian state. And when 35 diplomats with families and young children were thrown away, not even giving them time enough to collect their belongings, yes, we decided not to respond because that was a conscientious step. Mr. Obama and his team were just very furious about the Russian Federation, and that fury was accounted for by the failure of their candidate of the Democratic Party, and we realized that, and everybody did, and we decided not to be stupid responding to his evil things. And when the Trump administration failed to withdraw this illegitimate decision. I'm not going to discuss the details. Very difficult situation. Look at the moods in the Congress and mass media. In the majority of mass media, we even then realized that we had to respond because the reciprocity laws in diplomacy is something you have to follow. And that's why we were adequately reciprocated with the well-known decision on termination for for the American diplomats to use their two facilities, their properties. So, and we are now filing a suit. We went to court. Of course, we would like to be a legitimate and lawful state, and inside Russia, we are doing a lot to strengthen our court system. And internationally, we are going to strive for fairness through legitimate procedures. By the way, the United States with and all many Western partners, when we're talking about the human rights, they're always saying that they are telling you and us and many others that you have to provide the supremacy of law in your country. We say, okay, we're ready to do that. But when we start discussing international issues and say, okay, let's put down that internationally there's always should be democracy and supremacy of law, they usually refrain from that. That's the double standard. That's the desire to prevent the natural course of historical process in correspondence with which a multipolar and not single polar international system is built up. So, you know what? We are very pragmatic in dealing with the states. Where it is possible to use in the interest of a solution or solving global tasks, we will interact with them. I think that can be said about the dialogue on strategic stability, and despite anything, if we reject it, it would be, I think, irresponsible on us. And I'm very satisfied that the new administration does not reject it. And that can be said also about some separate aspects. For instance, situation in Syria, we with the States and Jordan decided to set up a very important de-escalation zone in the southwest of the Syrian Republic, and that was quite an achievement. But again, I should mention about the lack of ability to agree, and as you might know, and if you follow the news and from our Ministry of Defense messages, there's a very bizarre phenomenon when from Iraq, where allegedly the Americans have serious influence, and from the Syrian zones which are controlled by Americans, the militants, the terrorists, using their pickups and guns, they are leaving freely those zones, and we are trying to clarify and identify what it is all about. And we hope that our concerns that it might be conscientious or deliberate will not be justified. So, of course, we are ready to work with the states at any other problem or issue that could normalize the situation in the world, including such sphere as cyber security. We have prepared the corresponding proposals, and Presidents Putin and Trump discussed it in the fields of the Hamburg, the Big 20 summit, and there was a positive statement to set up a joint working group on cybersecurity, and in the framework of such a group to dismantle all those doubts as to who was involved where and at which purpose, or whether it is all thoughtful thing. And unfortunately, due to some political contingency or political expediency, the White House could not support or confirm this kind of intention, and that's quite a sad thing, because it torpedoes the mutual agreements and those who want to, and they want to keep this type of relationship in such an awful status without any, I would stress the word, no facts were provided. And when we ask them for facts, they say, we are sure that you have interfered in our elections and still are doing it, but we cannot provide any facts because it's top secret. But you can say this thing about just anything. You can accuse just anyone of anything. But when now, no, they are trying to and in our relations with the Europeans, between Russia and NATO, they're trying to impose a discussion on us, the essence of which would be the accusation of us in dealing with hybrid wars. Our response is very simple. Let's start with cybersecurity. If all of you are trying to accuse us of interference in the elections of the United States, France, Sweden. No facts provided, and the fact that the Chancellor of Germany was listened to by the American security. It's all they keep silent about that, especially those who are accusing us of all those non-existent sins. We are very philosophical about that, because those bias and double standards, that's something we're already used to, and that's, I think, a phenomenon of, to a large extent, it's exactly the painful perception which the West shows, because the era of their domination in the history of the mankind is just past, is moving away. This process is going to be lengthy, because this domination era lasted for several centuries, but that's the objective reality that it's leaving, and that's going to be, I'm sure the Western countries will realize that by the end of the day, but of course it's a painful process for them, because they're accustomed to a different status, because when they were sort of commissioning the music, so now they will have to agree on the score for the whole orchestra, for the whole concert of an international community. A couple more questions, if we may. We have the second row here, and then a colleague from here. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Lavrov and Russian Federation for having us here. My name is Javier Flores. I'm from Honduras. How do you see actual situation between Russia and the Central American region through the integration system of Central America, and how do you see it in the next 5 to 10 years? Thank you.
We are very much interested in the development of our relations with Latin America and the Caribbean basin, and both in bilateral relations and your organizations like CELAC. And I will complete my answer to the previous question with the statement that a multipolar system is being built up in the world. And it's clear that the Latin America and Caribbean zone becoming one of the carriers of this basis, a foundation of this multipolar system. And that's an objective reality. That's the place which belongs to you. It is developing well and fast, and progressive principles of relations between the states are being built up. And very important, I think, is the agreement that exists in the Latin American and Caribbean zone not to recognize those who came to power after anti-constitutional coup d'etats. And by the way, this principle, we offer this principle to be made universal through the United Nations organization. And last December, the General Assembly approved a resolution which was called Establishment of the New, More Fair Order, which says of non-interference into internal affairs, or lopsided compulsory measures, or extraterritorial use of legislation, and coup d'etats as a way or method of change of power or authority. And the same countries were voted against it, those who were sort of encouraging those coup d'etats, I mean, in the Ukraine or somewhere else. So as for the relations with integration facilities and Central American, well, back in 2015, I was involved in the ministry meeting of the Central American integration system of Russia at the level of ministers of foreign affairs. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was conducted in Guatemala, and the Russian Federation then address the organization to provide us a status of non-regional observer of the Central American integration system. By the way, Honduras was actively for this step, as well as the overwhelming majority of the members of this integration system. As far as I understand, there's one country which is so far doubtful, but our friends promised to work with this country, and I hope that in the nearest future we will